first myth today came via request, and it's the claim that in the early 90s, an Israeli classical musician played a concert through a bombing. Well, while the core of this is actually true, the details are not that simple, but it does stand as a rather unique moment in music history that was captured on tape. The musician in question is violinist and composer Isaac Stern, and to dispel the first wrong in this myth, he's actually Polish but was performing in Israel at the time. The incident in question happened during the early weeks of the Gulf War at the beginning of the 1990s, and at that time, Israel was being regularly bombarded with missiles coming out of Iraq. So on the evening in question, Stern is mid-performance when the air raid sirens start going off. And after a few seconds, the musicians leave the stage and the audience starts putting on gas masks that were under their seat in preparation for such a possible event. After about 30 or 40 seconds, the air raid sirens were still going off and Stern comes back out onto the stage with no gas mask and starts performing on his own. He stands center stage with no backing orchestra whatsoever in an amazing act of defiance. The audience just sits there watching appreciatively through the gas masks, and you can find the video on YouTube very easily, and it's one of the most surreal scenes you'll ever see. But it is 100% fact that not too long ago, one of the most well-respected classical musicians on the planet played through an air raid. Our second myth today is a rather odd one, but I've been asked it so many different times I felt I finally needed to address this. For decades, there's been this persistent rumor that Mama Cass Elliot from the Mamas and the Papas somehow found herself with an increased vocal range after being hit on the head with a lead pipe. Seriously, this one has been persistent for decades, but like anybody with any common sense might assume, this one is completely false. But here is the catch and why the rumor has managed to stay alive for so many years. Mama Cass made the claim many times during interviews, and it actually does have roots in an incident that did happen in her life. She was actually in a club in the Bahamas where they were doing construction, and a lead pipe actually did fall on her head. And this one gained even further legs because Mama Cass said it happened before she joined the Mamas and the Papas, so there really wasn't any music that you could compare it to see if she was telling the truth or not. Except of course for the fact that there is music that we can compare it to. Cass Elliot was in a handful of different musical groups before joining the Mamas and the Papas. And if you track down albums from groups called the Big Three or the Mugwumps, you can hear her hitting notes all across the vocal scale with no problem whatsoever. And there's nothing in her later career that you cannot find here in terms of sonic capability. So while it's a cool story, I guess, and it certainly gave her street cred with fans, it's absolutely false. Every word of it. Our final myth today is the claim that the band Weezer outright despises one of their most popular albums. Simply put, this is completely true, and it's not them trying to be more hipster than their audience. It's cold hard fact. Back when the band's Pinkerton record was released in 1996, it was generally hailed as a horrible record and possibly one of the worst albums of all time. Every critic panned the record, and most of their fans overwhelmingly agreed. However, over the next few years, Pinkerton actually started getting a very large cult following and started falling into that you need to listen to it a lot of times before you get it type of album category. And of course, many years after the fact, Rolling Stone famously rewrote their entire review of the album, giving it 5 stars. Well, about the time that the Green Album came out, Rivers Cuomo, the frontman from Weezer, finally started letting loose about his feelings on the record. And at many times, he has called Pinkerton absolutely hideous, as well as saying that the album caused him a massive amount of anxiety, and he'd just as soon never play any of those songs again. Even only a few years ago, people have still been asking him about Pinkerton, and in an interview in 2010, Rivers said that as far as he was concerned, that album could go F itself. So yes, at least one member of Weezer absolutely despises Pinkerton. So those are the myths for this week. Be sure to check back here every single Thursday as I delve into some of the coolest stories in music history, and be here every day for all the music news, reviews, and knowledge you'll ever need.